twin babies stop breathing. She begs billionaire CEO ex-husband for emergency surgery money. He refuses. Please, Gabriel. I'm begging you. Emma and Grace. They're going to die if we don't get this surgery tonight. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched like an eternity before Gabriel Sterling's voice cut through Isabella's desperation like ice. You made your choice 3 years ago, Isabella. You walked out on our marriage, disappeared in the middle of the night like a thief. Now you want to crawl back because you need something from me. They're your daughters. Isabella's voice cracked as she pressed her face against the cold glass of the NICU window. Whatever happened between us, they're innocent. They didn't choose this. So you claim. His tone remained glacial. Yet when I asked for DNA testing, you refused. When I tried to reach out, you blocked my calls. And now, conveniently, when you need $200,000, suddenly they're mine. I left because you were suffocating me. Because your jealousy and control were destroying both of us. But these babies, Gabriel, they have your eyes. They have your smile. Look at them and tell me they're not yours. I don't need to look at anything. You made your bed, Isabella. Now lie in it. The line went dead. Have you ever been forced to choose between your pride and the life of someone you love? Have you ever had to crawl back to someone who shattered you, knowing they hold all the power? This is the story of a mother's desperate race against a 6-hour countdown and a billionaire's cold heart that might cost 2 innocent lives. But what Isabella didn't know was that Gabriel Sterling had been watching her from afar for 3 years, and tonight's phone call would change everything. Stay with me to discover how far a mother will go, and whether love can truly conquer the deepest betrayal. If you've ever believed in second chances, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. 6 hours earlier at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in Manhattan, Isabella Summers watched the monitors surrounding her 3-month-old twins flash red as their oxygen levels plummeted. The steady rhythm of their labored breathing was failing, and the specialist's words echoed in her mind. 6 hours until their airways closed completely. Mrs. Summers? Dr. Martinez approached her with gentle eyes, his expression grave. His scrubs were wrinkled from a 12-hour shift, but his focus remained sharp. We need to make a decision about the surgery. The window is narrowing. Isabella pressed her palms against the glass, separating her from Emma and Grace. Her daughters lay in their respective incubators, tubes snaking from their tiny bodies to machines that beeped in increasingly erratic patterns. At 3 months old, they were supposed to be cooing, smiling, reaching for toys. Instead, they fought for every breath. How long do we have? She whispered, her breath fogging the glass. 6 hours, maybe less. Their airways are narrowing due to the genetic condition. Without the surgery, Dr. Martinez didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Emma stirred in her incubator, her little chest rising and falling with visible effort. She had Gabriel's storm-gray eyes, though she'd never met her father. Grace was quieter, more reserved like Isabella herself. But when she did look up, those same penetrating eyes stared back with an intelligence that seemed far too old for her tiny face. The specialist from Johns Hopkins is here, Dr. Martinez continued. Dr. Richardson is the best pediatric airway surgeon on the East Coast. But the hospital requires payment up front for this type of experimental procedure. The insurance companies. How much? Isabella already knew the answer would destroy her. $200,000. The number hit her like a physical blow. Isabella had been struggling financially since the twins' birth. Working as a freelance architect while caring for 2 medically complex infants meant she barely earned enough to cover their basic medical needs, let alone experimental surgery. Over the past 3 months, she'd exhausted every option. Her parents had mortgaged their retirement home in Connecticut to help with the initial NICU costs. Her sister had emptied her children's college funds. Friends had organized crowdfunding campaigns that raised barely a fraction of what they needed. I've tried everything, Isabella said, her voice hollow. Every bank, every loan company. My credit is maxed out. My family has given everything they have. Dr. Martinez nodded sympathetically. I understand. These situations are impossible. But Mrs. Summers, I need you to know that if we don't proceed within the next 6 hours, the opportunity will be lost. Their airways will close completely. Isabella sank into the uncomfortable plastic chair beside the incubators. 3 years ago, $200,000 would have been pocket change. 3 years ago, She'd been Mrs. Gabriel Sterling, wife to one of New York's most successful real estate magnates. She'd lived in a Fifth Avenue penthouse, worn designer gowns to charity galas, and never looked at a price tag. 3 years ago, she'd also been suffocating in a golden cage. There's one more option, she said quietly, the words feeling like ash in her mouth. Dr. Martinez waited patiently. Their father. He has the money, but we're estranged. That was putting it mildly. Estranged didn't begin to cover the devastation Gabriel Sterling had left in his wake. Estranged didn't encompass the fear that had driven her to flee in the middle of the night, 6 months pregnant and terrified. Estranged didn't explain why she'd changed her name back to Summers and tried to disappear completely. Have you contacted him about the twins' condition? Isabella shook her head. He doesn't even know they exist. The lie came easily. Gabriel knew about the pregnancy. That much she'd told him during that horrible final conversation 3 years ago. But she'd never told him about the twins specifically, and he'd never bothered to find out. As far as she knew, he'd written off both her and their unborn child the moment she walked out. Mrs. Summers, I know this is difficult, but if there's any chance, I'll call him. The words felt like swallowing glass. I'll try. Dr. Martinez squeezed her shoulder gently. I'll buy you as much time as I can. But remember, 6 hours maximum. As he walked away, Isabella stared at her phone. Gabriel's number was still there, buried in her contacts under Do Not Call. She'd kept it through 2 phone upgrades and countless moments of weakness when she'd almost dialed it just to hear his voice. Her hands trembled as she scrolled to his contact. It was almost midnight on a Tuesday. He'd be asleep in his penthouse, probably with one of the socialites she'd seen photographed with him in the society pages. The thought of those pictures still made her stomach clench with a jealousy she had no right to feel. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, his voice answered, groggy but alert. Isabella. The sound of her name on his lips after 3 years of silence made her knees weak. What's wrong? Even half asleep, Gabriel's mind worked quickly. He'd always been like that, able to assess a situation in seconds and respond accordingly. It was what made him so successful in business, and what had made him so terrifying as a husband. Gabriel, I need to talk to you. It's about. She looked at Emma and Grace, their tiny faces peaceful despite the machines keeping them alive. It's about our children. The silence on his end stretched so long she wondered if the call had dropped. Our children? His voice was carefully controlled, but she heard the underlying tension. Isabella, you were pregnant when you left. Singular. What are you talking about? Twins. I had twins. Emma and Grace. They're 3 months old, and Gabriel, they're dying. Another long silence. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted into the cold, corporate tone she remembered from his worst moods. And you're calling me because? Because they need surgery. Tonight. $200,000 that I don't have. Oh. The single syllable dripped with cynicism. There it is. 3 years of silence, and now you need money. Please, Gabriel. I'm begging you. Emma and Grace. They're going to die if we don't get this surgery tonight. That's when he delivered his crushing rejection, hanging up on her as her world collapsed. Isabella stared at the dead phone in her hands, the weight of his rejection settling over her like a shroud. Around her, the NICU hummed with quiet activity. Nurses moved between incubators with practiced efficiency. Other parents sat vigil over their own tiny patients. But none of them faced what she faced, watching her children die, while the one person who could save them refused to help. No luck. Isabella looked up to find Nurse Patricia approaching. The older woman had been kind to Isabella over the past weeks, always checking in, always offering a sympathetic ear. He hung up on me. The words came out flat, emotionless. She was beyond tears now, moving into that numb space where the mind goes when reality becomes too much to bear. I'm sorry, honey. Some people. Patricia shook her head. Well, some people just don't deserve to be parents. Isabella wanted to defend Gabriel, which surprised her. Despite everything, the controlling behavior, the jealousy, the way he'd let her walk away, she knew he wasn't fundamentally a bad man. He was damaged, shaped by abandonment and betrayal in his own childhood. But that didn't excuse what he was doing now. There's still time, Patricia said gently. Maybe he'll reconsider. Maybe when he thinks about it. But Isabella knew Gabriel Sterling. When he made a decision, especially one driven by wounded pride, he didn't reconsider. He'd written her off 3 years ago, and apparently, he'd written off their children too. She settled back into the chair, watching the monitors that tracked Emma and Grace's declining condition. In 5.5 hours, if nothing changed, she would lose them both. The thought was so massive, so incomprehensible, that her mind simply refused to process it. Instead, she found herself drifting back to the beginning, to the man Gabriel had been before everything went wrong. 3.5 years earlier, the charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art was in full swing when Isabella Summers first laid eyes on Gabriel Sterling. She'd been reluctant to attend. These society events weren't really her scene, but her firm had purchased a table, and as one of their rising young architects, she'd been expected to make an appearance. See the man by the Egyptian wing? Her colleague Sarah had whispered, nodding toward a tall, dark-haired figure surrounded by an admiring crowd. That's Gabriel Sterling. Real estate empire worth about $3 billion, never married, and every single woman in Manhattan has tried to land him. Isabella had glanced over, expecting to see the typical trust fund playboy type. Instead, she found herself looking at a man who commanded attention not through volume or flash, but through sheer presence. He was listening intently to an elderly woman, his full focus on her words, and when he smiled at something she said, the expression transformed his entire face. He's handsome, Isabella had admitted. Handsome is an understatement. But be careful, word is he's got control issues. His last relationship ended badly when the woman couldn't handle his intensity. Isabella had filed that information away and tried to focus on the evening's purpose, networking for her firm. But throughout the night, she found her gaze drifting back to Gabriel Sterling. He moved through the crowd with confident ease, but there was something almost lonely about him. Despite being surrounded by people, he seemed separate, untouchable. It was nearly 11 when he approached her. "You're Isabella Summers," he said, appearing at her elbow as she studied a particularly beautiful piece of ancient jewelry. "The architect who designed the Meridian Cultural Center." She turned, surprised. "You know my work. I make it my business to know talent when I see it." His gray eyes held hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "That building is extraordinary. The way you integrated modern design with historical preservation, it's genius." Isabella felt heat rise in her cheeks. Compliments on her professional work always affected her more than personal flattery. "Thank you. That project was particularly close to my heart. I have a proposition for you." The direct approach was so typically Gabriel, though she wouldn't know that until later. "I'm listening. I'm developing a mixed-use complex in Brooklyn. High-end residential with commercial space and a community center. I want you to design it." Isabella blinked. "Mr. Sterling, I appreciate the offer, but my firm would need to bid on a project that size. There are protocols. I don't want your firm. I want you." He stepped closer, and she caught a hint of his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her slightly dizzy. "Start your own practice. I'll be your first client. You don't even know if I'm good enough for a project like that." Gabriel's smile was slow and devastating. "I never make mistakes about people, Isabella. You're exactly what I need." The way he said it, with such absolute certainty, should have been arrogant. Instead, it was magnetic. Here was a man who saw something in her that she'd never dared claim for herself. "Have dinner with me tomorrow night," he continued. "Let me show you the site. Let me convince you that this could be the start of something extraordinary." Isabella knew she should say no. Everything about Gabriel Sterling screamed danger, the intensity in his eyes, the way he seemed to see straight through her professional composure to something deeper. But she also felt a thrill of possibility that she hadn't experienced in years. "All right," she heard herself saying. "Dinner." That single word changed the trajectory of her entire life. The courtship that followed was like nothing Isabella had ever experienced. Gabriel pursued her with single-minded focus, showering her with attention that was both thrilling and overwhelming. He sent flowers to her office daily, not generic roses, but exotic blooms chosen specifically for their architectural beauty. He took her to restaurants where reservations were impossible to get, private art showings where she could study design elements to her heart's content. But it was the quiet moments that truly seduced her. Gabriel in her tiny apartment, sitting on her second-hand sofa, listening with rapt attention as she explained her vision for sustainable urban design. Gabriel bringing her coffee at exactly the right temperature during late-night work sessions. Gabriel watching her sketch with an expression of such profound admiration that it took her breath away. "You're brilliant," he told her one evening as they walked through Central Park. "Do you know that? You see possibilities where others see problems. You create beauty from nothing." "It's just my job," she'd protested, but he'd stopped walking and turned to face her. "No, it's who you are. It's in every line you draw, every space you envision. You're going to change the world, Isabella Summers. And I want to be there to watch you do it." 6 months later, he proposed on the rooftop of the building where they'd first discussed her independent practice. The ring was a flawless vintage emerald surrounded by diamonds, chosen not for its size, but for its history and beauty. The building spread out below them was her first independent project, nearly complete and already winning architectural awards. "Marry me," he said simply, no elaborate speech or grand gesture. "Be my partner in everything. Let me support your dreams while you inspire mine." Isabella said yes because she loved him desperately and because the future he painted seemed impossibly perfect. She said yes because Gabriel Sterling made her feel like the most important person in the world. She had no way of knowing that the same intensity that made her feel so cherished would eventually become a prison. Present day, 2:30 a.m. Isabella jerked back to the present as one of Emma's monitors began beeping more urgently. A nurse hurried over to adjust something, her movements efficient but concerned. The oxygen saturation numbers had dropped another point. 4.5 hours left. Isabella stood and began pacing the small family area adjacent to the NICU. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the polished linoleum as she walked the same circuit she'd been walking for weeks. Past the vending machines, around the cluster of uncomfortable chairs, back to the window where she could see her daughters. The wedding had been perfect, of course. Gabriel had spared no expense, flying in flowers from Ecuador, hiring a string quartet that had played at Carnegie Hall, securing the grand ballroom at the plaza for a reception that made the society pages. Isabella had felt like a princess in her custom Vera Wang gown, floating through the evening in a haze of happiness and champagne. The honeymoon in Italy had been magical. Gabriel had rented a villa in Tuscany, complete with a private chef and breathtaking views of rolling vineyards. They'd made love for hours in the afternoon sun, talked about their dreams late into the night, and planned the amazing life they were going to build together. The problems started slowly, almost imperceptibly. At first, Isabella had been charmed by Gabriel's attentiveness. He wanted to know about her day, her thoughts, her plans. He remembered every detail she shared and followed up with thoughtful questions. But gradually, the questions became more probing, more possessive. "Who was that man you were talking to at the coffee shop? Why didn't you tell me you were having lunch with Sarah? I saw Marcus from your old firm called you 3 times. What did he want?" Isabella had tried to dismiss it as newlywed adjustment, the natural growing pains of learning to be a couple. Gabriel had explained his behavior as protectiveness, born from his fear of losing her. She'd wanted to understand, to be patient with his insecurities. But patience became harder as the boundaries of her life slowly contracted. Gabriel hired a car service for her, claiming he worried about her safety on the subway. The driver was instructed to report her movements. Gabriel suggested she work from the penthouse instead of renting office space, arguing it would be more cost-effective. Gradually, her professional network dwindled as Gabriel found reasons why various colleagues were unsuitable company. "Marcus is clearly still in love with you. Can't you see how he looks at you? Sarah is jealous of your success. She's trying to undermine your confidence. That client is taking advantage of you. Let me handle the contract negotiations." Each restriction was presented as care, as protection, as Gabriel's way of ensuring her happiness and success. And because she loved him, because she wanted to believe that his motives were pure, Isabella allowed herself to be slowly isolated from everything and everyone that had made her feel like herself. The breaking point came 18 months into their marriage. Isabella had been asked to speak at a design conference in Los Angeles. It was a huge honor, her first major speaking engagement, a chance to present her work to an international audience. She'd been thrilled, already planning her presentation, when Gabriel had calmly informed her she wouldn't be going. "It's not a good time," he'd said, not looking up from his laptop. I have the Mitchell deal closing that week. I need you here. You need me? Gabriel, this is my career. This could open doors I've been trying to open for years. Your career is important to me too, but marriage requires sacrifice. I thought you understood that. The argument that followed was their worst yet. Isabella had accused Gabriel of trying to control her life. Gabriel had accused Isabella of prioritizing her career over their relationship. Voices were raised, tears were shed, and ultimately, Isabella had capitulated. She'd called the conference organizers and declined the speaking opportunity. But something had broken between them that night, some essential trust that never fully healed. Gabriel seemed to sense her growing resentment because his behavior became even more controlling. He insisted on approving her projects, her meetings, even her lunch plans. He hired a secretary whose primary job seemed to be monitoring Isabella's activities. He bought her a new phone with tracking capabilities for her safety. I love you, he would say when she protested. Everything I do is because I love you. Can't you see that? And because she loved him too, because she remembered the man who had seen her potential and supported her dreams, Isabella tried to make it work. She told herself that marriage required compromise. She convinced herself that Gabriel's behavior came from love, not control. It wasn't until she discovered she was pregnant that everything finally became clear. Isabella stared at the positive pregnancy test in the marble bathroom of their penthouse, a mix of joy and terror washing over her. She'd always wanted children, and the thought of creating a life with Gabriel filled her with happiness. But another part of her, a part she'd been trying to silence for months, whispered a terrifying question. What would Gabriel be like as a father? Would he control their child the way he controlled her? Would he isolate their baby from friends, from experiences, from the world? Would he love their child so possessively that he smothered them? The answer came during the conversation that ended their marriage. We're having a baby, Isabella had told him that evening over dinner. She'd expected joy, excitement, maybe tears. Instead, Gabriel had gone very still. Are you sure? I took 3 tests. I'm sure. A slow smile had spread across his face, but there was something in his eyes that made Isabella's stomach clench with unease. This is perfect, he'd said. Now you'll never want to leave. The casual way he'd said it, as if her pregnancy was just another way to ensure her compliance, had shattered the last of Isabella's illusions. She'd realized in that moment that Gabriel didn't see her as a partner or even as a person. She was a possession, something beautiful to be acquired and displayed and controlled. That night, while Gabriel slept peacefully beside her, Isabella had made her plan. She'd waited 3 more weeks, pretending everything was normal while secretly preparing her escape. She'd opened a new bank account, contacted a lawyer, and arranged for a moving company to pack her belongings while Gabriel was out of town. The hardest part had been the letter she'd left on his pillow. Gabriel, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I'm taking nothing that belongs to you. Not the jewelry, not the clothes, not the life you built around me. I'm only taking what was always mine, my freedom and our child. I know you'll say you love me, and maybe in your way, you do. But love isn't supposed to feel like drowning. Love isn't supposed to shrink your world until you forget who you used to be. I wanted us to work. I tried to be the wife you needed. But I can't raise our child in a cage, even a golden one. Don't try to find me. Tonight, she'd learned the truth. Gabriel hadn't moved on. He'd nursed his anger and resentment until it had curdled into something cold and vengeful. Cold enough to let their children die rather than admit he still cared. Emma's monitor beeped again, more insistently this time. Isabella rushed to the window as Dr. Martinez appeared, checking the readouts with a frown. What's happening? Isabella asked through the intercom. Her oxygen saturation is dropping faster than we anticipated. The airway narrowing is accelerating. Isabella's blood turned to ice. How much time do we have? Dr. Martinez met her eyes with compassionate honesty. 4 hours. Maybe less. 4 hours. Isabella looked at her phone, at Gabriel's contact information, at the man who held her daughter's lives in his hands. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. If Gabriel wanted to humiliate her, if he wanted her to crawl, then that's what she would do. She couldn't call him again. He'd proven he would just hang up. But she knew where he lived, knew he'd be home in his penthouse fortress. It would take her 90 minutes to drive to the Sterling estate in the Hudson Valley, 90 minutes she couldn't spare. But Gabriel also had a helicopter, private medical facilities, connections that could move mountains. If she could get to him, if she could look him in the eye and make him see what he was doing, maybe she could reach whatever humanity remained in the man she'd once loved. Isabella kissed her fingertips and pressed them against the glass where Emma and Grace lay fighting for breath. "Mommy's going to bring help," she whispered. "Hold on, my darlings. Just hold on." The elevator in Isabella's apartment building wheezed to a stop on the 4th floor. She'd been living in this modest Brooklyn walk-up since the twins were born, a far cry from the luxury she'd known as Gabriel's wife. The rent was reasonable, the neighbors were kind, and most importantly, it was a place Gabriel had never touched with his presence. She grabbed her keys and the emergency overnight bag she'd packed months ago. Every NICU parent learned to keep one ready. Inside were clean clothes, basic toiletries, and phone chargers. Everything she might need for the fight of her life. The drive through Manhattan at 3 a.m. was surreal. The city that never slept was dozing fitfully, with only occasional taxis and late-night delivery trucks sharing the empty streets. Isabella had borrowed her neighbor's elderly Honda, a far cry from the luxury cars she'd once taken for granted. As she navigated toward the highway that would take her north to the Hudson Valley, memories continued to assault her. The first time Gabriel had brought her to the Sterling estate, she'd been overwhelmed by its grandeur. The limestone mansion sat on 50 acres of perfectly manicured grounds, with gardens that belonged in a magazine and a view of the river that took her breath away. "It's too much," she'd protested. "I don't belong in a place like this." "You belong wherever I am," Gabriel had replied, pulling her close as they stood on the terrace overlooking the valley. "This will be our retreat from the world, our sanctuary." Now, driving through the darkness toward that same estate, Isabella realized how prophetic those words had been. Gabriel had wanted to create a world where only the two of them existed, where he could control every variable and ensure she never left him. The irony was that his possessiveness had driven her away more effectively than any outside force could have. Her phone rang as she merged onto the Taconic Parkway. For a wild moment, she hoped it might be Gabriel, calling to say he'd changed his mind. Instead, it was Dr. Martinez. "Mrs. Summers, I wanted to update you on the girl's condition." Isabella's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "How are they?" "Stable for now, but Grace's numbers are starting to decline as well. I need to ask, have you made any progress with securing the funding?" "I'm working on it. Please, just keep them stable. I'm going to get the money." "I'll do everything I can, but Mrs. Summers, time is becoming critical." After he hung up, Isabella pressed the accelerator harder. The Honda protested but picked up speed, carrying her through the sleeping suburbs toward her past and her daughter's future. The Sterling estate appeared ahead like something from a fairy tale, its windows glowing warmly against the darkness. Isabella's hands shook as she approached the imposing iron gates. How many times had she driven through these gates as Gabriel's wife, coming home from events or shopping trips or romantic weekends away? Now she was coming as a supplicant, a beggar seeking mercy from the man she'd fled. The intercom crackled to life before she could press the button. "Mrs. Summers." James's voice carried surprise and what might have been sympathy. "Mr. Sterling is not expecting you." James had been with the Sterling family for 15 years, serving as head of security and general majordomo. He'd always been kind to Isabella, and she'd often wondered what he thought of her midnight disappearance. "Tell him his daughters are dying, James. Tell him I'm here to beg." The pause was long enough that Isabella began to worry he would refuse her entry. Then the gates swung open with mechanical precision, just as they had hundreds of times before. The driveway seemed longer than she remembered, winding through perfectly maintained grounds toward the main house. Isabella parked the Honda beside the marble steps, its modest presence incongruous among the luxury that surrounded it. Gabriel stood waiting on the steps, and Isabella's breath caught despite everything. At 35, he remained devastatingly handsome. His dark hair was perfectly styled even at this hour, his gray eyes as piercing as ever. He wore a charcoal suit that emphasized his tall, lean frame. Had he dressed for this confrontation, or did Gabriel Sterling simply never appear in public looking anything less than perfect? "You look terrible," he said without preamble, his gaze taking in her rumpled clothes, her hollow cheeks, the exhaustion that clung to her like a shroud. 3 years of single motherhood, of working multiple jobs while caring for medically complex infants, of choosing between groceries and medicine had left their mark. Isabella knew she was a shadow of the polished woman who had once graced his arm at society events. "They're your daughters, Gabriel." Her voice cracked with desperation. "Whatever happened between us, they're innocent." "So you claim." His tone remained glacial, but something flickered in his eyes. "Pain, perhaps, or memory. Yet you refused DNA testing. Because you demanded it to humiliate me." The old anger flared, giving her strength even as her legs trembled with exhaustion. "You wanted proof that I hadn't betrayed you, even though you know, I never looked at another man." Gabriel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You left, in the middle of the night, like a thief." "I left because you suffocated me." The words burst out before she could stop them, 3 years of buried resentment exploding to the surface. "Your jealousy, your control, your need to possess every breath I took. I couldn't live in that golden cage anymore. And now you want back in." Isabella stared at him. This man who had once traced every curve of her body with worshipful hands, who had whispered poetry against her skin in the dark hours before dawn. "I want my daughters to live." Something flickered in his eyes, pain, perhaps, or memory, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the cold mask he'd perfected in boardrooms and business negotiations. "Come inside," he said finally. "We'll discuss terms." The tension is unbearable, isn't it? Drop a fire in the comments if you're feeling the intensity of this moment. The interior of the mansion remained unchanged, as if time had stopped the moment Isabella walked out 3 years ago. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, priceless art adorned the walls, and everything was perfectly curated in that cold, museum-like perfection that Gabriel preferred. Isabella followed him through familiar hallways toward his study, her worn sneakers silent on the marble floors. How many times had she walked these same halls as his wife, planning dinner parties or discussing architectural projects? Now she felt like an intruder in a space that had once been home. Gabriel's study was exactly as she remembered, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, mahogany desk that cost more than most people's cars, leather chairs positioned for maximum psychological impact. This room had been the scene of their most passionate arguments and equally passionate reconciliations. Her pulse quickened despite herself as memories flooded back. Being pressed against that very desk, while Gabriel's mouth claimed hers with desperate hunger, the way he would lock the door and make love to her with an intensity that left them both shaking. "Sit," Gabriel commanded, moving toward the bar cart in the corner. "I don't have time for drinks. Every minute we waste. Sit down." The authority in his voice was absolute, the same tone that commanded boardrooms and bent competitors to his will. Isabella perched on the edge of a leather chair, every nerve ending alive with tension. Gabriel poured himself a scotch, his movements precise and controlled. She watched his hands, those elegant fingers that had once played her body like a virtuoso musician, and felt an unwelcome heat low in her belly. Some responses, it seemed, were too deeply ingrained to be erased by time or heartbreak. $200,000, Gabriel said, settling behind his massive desk. The positioning was deliberate, him in the power position, her as supplicant. "For experimental surgery on children who may not even be mine. They are yours." Isabella leaned forward desperately. "Look at them, Gabriel. Emma has your eyes, your stubborn chin. Grace has your way of studying people, like she's figuring out their weaknesses." A ghost of a smile touched Gabriel's lips at that last observation, but it vanished quickly. "Will you submit to DNA testing?" The question hung between them like a blade. Isabella closed her eyes, feeling the last of her pride crumble. She'd fought this demand 3 years ago, seeing it as the ultimate expression of Gabriel's distrust. Now, with her daughters' lives hanging in the balance, pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Yes. And you'll stay here during their recovery, however long it takes." Her eyes snapped open. "What?" Gabriel's smile was predatory, sharp with an edge she'd never seen before. "If they are my daughters, they belong here. As do you. I won't be your prisoner again. You'll be my wife again." His voice dropped to a silky whisper that sent shivers down her spine despite her fear. in every sense of the word. The air between them crackled with dangerous electricity. Isabella felt her breath catch as his gaze raked over her body with obvious intent. She knew that look, had seen it countless times when he was about to claim her with possessive passion. "You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a deal." Gabriel rose from his chair, moving around the desk with predatory grace. "Your daughter's lives in exchange for your submission." He stopped inches from her chair, close enough that she could smell his cologne, that intoxicating blend of sandalwood and cedar that had always made her weak. Even now, even after everything, her treacherous body responded to his proximity. "You were mine once, Isabella. Mind, body, and soul." His voice was hypnotic, seductive, dangerous. "You can be mine again. And if I refuse..." His hand touched her cheek with devastating gentleness, the same caress that had once made her melt with desire. "Then you walk away, and we both live with the consequences." Isabella closed her eyes as his thumb traced her lower lip. Her body betrayed her, responding to his touch with the same helpless desire that had always been her downfall. She could feel herself melting, her resistance crumbling like sand. "I hate you," she whispered, the words carrying no conviction. "No," he murmured, his mouth so close to her ear that his breath made her shiver. "You hate that you still want me." Before she could deny it, his lips captured hers in a kiss that was both punishment and promise. Isabella's resolve shattered completely as his tongue swept into her mouth with familiar dominance. She kissed him back desperately, her hands fisting in his suit jacket, 3 years of loneliness and pain pouring out in that single moment of connection. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Gabriel's eyes blazed with triumph and desire, while Isabella felt exposed, vulnerable, completely at his mercy. "Choose, Isabella." His voice was rough with want, but implacable in its demand. "Them or your pride." Tears streamed down her face as she looked into the eyes of the man who had been both her salvation and her destruction. In the distance, her phone buzzed with what was probably another update from Dr. Martinez. Time was running out, and Gabriel Sterling held all the cards. "Save them," she whispered, the words feeling like a death sentence for her soul. "And I'll be whatever you want me to be." Gabriel's smile was sharp with victory. "I'll make the call. I'll make the call." Gabriel reached for his phone with the same decisive movement that had built his empire. Isabella watched, hardly daring to breathe, as he scrolled through his contacts. Even at 4 a.m., Gabriel Sterling commanded instant attention. "Dr. Richardson? This is Gabriel Sterling." "Yes, I know what time it is." His voice carried the absolute authority of a man accustomed to moving mountains with a phone call. "I'm funding the emergency surgery for the Summers twins. Whatever the hospital needs, whatever you need. Money is no object." Isabella sagged in her chair as relief flooded through her. Whatever else Gabriel had become, whatever game he was playing, he was saving Emma and Grace. That was all that mattered right now. "We'll be there in 30 minutes. Gabriel continued into the phone. "Have everything ready. And doctor? These children are my daughters. Treat them accordingly." He hung up and immediately dialed another number. "James, prep the helicopter. We're flying to Manhattan General immediately." A pause. "Yes, at this hour. Emergency medical transport." Another call. "Dr. Martinez? Gabriel Sterling. I'm funding the surgery for Emma and Grace Summers. Dr. Richardson has been briefed. We'll be there shortly." Isabella watched this display of power with a mixture of gratitude and unease. This was the Gabriel she remembered, the man who could reshape reality with a few phone calls, who bent the world to his will through sheer force of personality and unlimited resources. "Thank you," she whispered when he finished the calls. Gabriel looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Don't thank me yet. We have an arrangement, Isabella. I intend to collect on every part of it." The threat in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, she felt only a numb acceptance. She'd made her choice. Whatever consequences followed were the price of her daughter's lives. "The helicopter will be ready in 10 minutes, Gabriel said, checking his watch. "We need to leave now if we're going to make it in time." Isabella stood on unsteady legs. "I need to call Dr. Martinez, let him know, already handled." Gabriel was shrugging into a black coat that probably cost more than Isabella's monthly rent. "My people are coordinating with the medical team. Your only job now is to keep up." They walked through the mansion toward the back terrace, where Gabriel's helicopter waited. Isabella had ridden in it before, during the golden days of their marriage when weekend trips to the Hamptons or Martha's Vineyard had been routine. Now, the aircraft felt like a lifeline carrying her toward salvation. Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling, the pilot greeted them. Isabella didn't correct the title. There would be time for that conversation later. Manhattan General, fastest route possible, Gabriel instructed as they climbed aboard. Emergency medical transport. The helicopter lifted off into the pre-dawn darkness, its powerful rotors cutting through the air with urgent purpose. Below them, the Hudson Valley fell away, replaced by the sprawling suburbs and eventually the glittering skyline of Manhattan. Gabriel sat across from Isabella in the luxurious cabin, his gray eyes studying her with an intensity that made her skin burn. She tried to focus on anything else, the city lights below, the pilot's voice over the radio, the steady thrum of the rotors. But Gabriel's presence was magnetic, inescapable. "You've lost weight," he observed, his voice pitched low enough that the pilot couldn't hear. Isabella's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, still soft from pregnancy and childbirth. 2 babies and 3 years of struggle will do that. You're still beautiful. The unexpected compliment hit her like a physical blow. Isabella turned to stare out the window, unwilling to let him see how his words affected her. Don't what? Don't pretend this is about anything other than your wounded pride. You want to punish me for leaving, and you're using my desperation to do it." Gabriel was quiet for so long that Isabella thought he wasn't going to respond. When he finally spoke, his voice held an edge she'd never heard before. "You want to know what wounded my pride, Isabella? Coming home to find your wedding ring on my pillow and a letter explaining why you couldn't stand to be married to me anymore." Isabella finally looked at him, seeing past the cold mask to the hurt beneath. "Gabriel, do you know how many nights I've read that letter? How many times I've analyzed every word, trying to understand where I went wrong? You didn't go wrong. You went too far. There's a difference. Is there?" Gabriel leaned forward, his intensity filling the small cabin. "I loved you more than I'd ever loved anything or anyone. I wanted to protect you, to give you everything, to make sure nothing could ever hurt you. How was that wrong?" Isabella met his gaze directly. "Because love isn't supposed to feel like drowning, Gabriel. Love isn't supposed to shrink your world until you forget who you used to be." She was quoting from her own letter, words she'd written in desperation 3 years ago. Gabriel's face went very still. "You memorized it," she realized. Every word. His admission was barely audible over the helicopter's noise. Every punctuation mark. "I could recite it in my sleep." The naked pain in his voice made Isabella's chest tight. She'd known her leaving would hurt him, but she'd never imagined the depth of that wound. For a man like Gabriel, who controlled everything around him, her disappearance must have felt like the ultimate betrayal. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Not for leaving. I had to do that. But for the way I did it. For not trying harder to make you understand." Gabriel's laugh was bitter. "Would you have stayed if I'd promised to change?" Isabella considered the question honestly. "I don't know. Maybe. If I believed you meant it. And now we're different people facing an impossible situation." Isabella looked out at the city sprawling below them. "Now we do whatever it takes to save our daughters." Gabriel nodded slowly. "Our daughters. You admit they're mine. I never denied it. I just refused to prove it to satisfy your paranoia. My paranoia kept me sane when everyone else said you'd probably been unfaithful. My paranoia was the only thing that made your leaving make sense." Isabella stared at him. "Everyone else? Gabriel, who told you I was unfaithful?" But before he could answer, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Mr. Sterling, we're approaching Manhattan General. ETA 3 minutes." The hospital's helipad was lit and waiting for them, medical personnel standing by with a gurney Isabella wouldn't need. As the helicopter touched down, Gabriel's hand briefly covered hers. "Whatever happens in there, we face it together," he said. "As their parents." Isabella nodded, surprised by the comfort she found in that simple declaration. Whatever else lay between them, Gabriel was right about one thing. Emma's oxygen saturation has dropped to 89%, and Grace isn't far behind. Dr. Richardson is scrubbing in now, but we need to move immediately. They rushed through hospital corridors that blurred together in Isabella's memory. Gabriel's hand was steady on her back, guiding her, supporting her, a solid presence in the chaos of her fear. The NICU was a hive of activity when they arrived. Nurses moved with practiced efficiency while machines beeped urgent warnings. Dr. Richardson, the specialist from Johns Hopkins, was already suited up and ready. "Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Summers," he greeted them tersely. "I've reviewed the case files. This is a complex procedure, but these girls are fighters. Their vitals show remarkable resilience for infants their age." Isabella pressed her face to the glass of Emma's incubator. Her daughter's tiny chest rose and fell with visible effort, but her gray eyes, Gabriel's eyes, were alert and aware. "How long will the surgery take?" Gabriel asked. 4 to 6 hours for both procedures. "We're taking Emma first since her condition is more critical, then Grace immediately after. The recovery room is already prepared with specialized equipment. Whatever you need," Gabriel said simply. "Cost is irrelevant." Dr. Richardson nodded. "We'll take excellent care of them. But I need to warn you, even with successful surgery, the recovery period will be lengthy. These children will need round-the-clock medical supervision for weeks, possibly months." Isabella felt Gabriel's hand find hers, his fingers intertwining with stunning gentleness. "They'll have it," he said firmly. "Whatever they need." As the medical team prepared to take Emma to surgery, Isabella was allowed one last moment with her daughters. She kissed her fingertips and pressed them to each incubator. "Mommy and Daddy are here," she whispered, the word Daddy feeling strange on her lips after 3 years. "We're not going anywhere. Fight for us, my darlings. Fight to come home." Gabriel stepped beside her, his large hand covering hers on the glass. "They're going to be fine," he said quietly. "They're Sterlings. We're too stubborn to die easily." Despite everything, Isabella found herself smiling. "Is that your family motto?" "It should be." Gabriel's voice held a warmth she hadn't heard in years. "It's certainly proven true so far." The waiting room became their world for the next 6 hours. Gabriel had somehow arranged for a private family suite complete with comfortable seating, a kitchenette, and space for Isabella to pace when the anxiety became overwhelming. True to form, Gabriel had also arranged for food, coffee, and anything else they might need. Isabella found herself oddly comforted by this display of his organizational skills. Whatever his faults, Gabriel Sterling took care of the people under his protection. "You should eat something," Gabriel said during hour 2, offering her a perfectly prepared sandwich from the hospital's executive dining room. "I can't. Not while there." Isabella gestured helplessly toward the surgical suites. "Emma would be halfway through the procedure by now." "That's good news. It means no complications so far." Isabella nodded, trying to find comfort in his logic. "You seem to know a lot about pediatric surgery for someone who's never been a father." Gabriel's expression grew carefully neutral. "I may have done some research over the years. About pregnancy, childbirth, infant development. Hypothetically, in case you ever came back." The simple admission hit Isabella like a physical blow. "Gabriel, I know what you're thinking. If I cared so much, why didn't I try to contact you? Why didn't I fight for you?" Isabella had been wondering exactly that. "Why didn't you?" Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the city waking up below them. "Because you asked me not to. In your letter, you said if I truly loved you, I'd let you go. So I did. That was the last thing I expected." "What did you expect?" Isabella considered the question. "I expected you to hire private investigators, to track me down and drag me back, to use your money and influence to force me to return. I thought about it." Gabriel's honesty was surprising. "For about 6 months, I thought about little else. But then I realized that forcing you back would only prove your point about me being controlling. So you just gave up?" "I learned to let go." Gabriel turned to face her fully. "It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but I learned. I went to therapy, Isabella. 2 years of sessions, twice a week, working through my control issues and abandonment trauma." Isabella stared at him in shock. The Gabriel she'd married would never have admitted to needing help, let alone sought professional therapy. "I'm not the same man you left," he continued. "I've learned patience. I've learned the difference between protection and possession. I've learned that love means trusting someone enough to let them choose you freely." Before Isabella could respond, Dr. Richardson appeared in the doorway of their suite. Both parents shot to their feet. Emma's surgery was successful, he announced, and Isabella nearly collapsed with relief. The airway reconstruction went perfectly. She's breathing on her own, and her vitals are strong. Gabriel's arm came around Isabella's waist, supporting her as she swayed. And Grace, we're taking her into surgery now. Based on Emma's results, I'm very optimistic about Grace's procedure as well. Can you feel your heart racing? Mine is. Let me know if you're as invested in Emma and Grace's survival as I am. 3 hours later, Dr. Richardson returned with news about Grace's surgery. Another complete success. Both girls are in recovery, breathing normally, and showing excellent response to the procedure. Isabella burst into tears of relief. 3 months of terror and desperation, finally, finding release. Gabriel pulled her against his chest, his own voice rough with emotion as he thanked the surgical team. When can we see them? Isabella asked through her tears. They're being moved to a specialized recovery unit now. You can see them in about an hour, once they're fully stabilized. 2 weeks later, the Sterling Estates medical wing had been transformed into a state-of-the-art pediatric recovery center. Gabriel had spared no expense, flying in specialized equipment and hiring a team of private nurses to provide round-the-clock care for Emma and Grace. Isabella stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching Gabriel read to their daughters. It was a scene that would have been impossible to imagine 3 years ago, the ruthless real estate mogul sitting cross-legged on the floor, making silly voices as he narrated a picture book to 2 3-month-old babies. Emma gurgled happily from her bouncy seat, her breathing clear and strong. Grace watched her father with serious gray eyes, as if memorizing every word for future reference. And then the little bunny hopped all the way home to his family, Gabriel concluded, closing the book with theatrical flourish. Just like Daddy and Mommy brought you home to be safe. Isabella's heart clenched at the easy way he'd claimed the title of Daddy, and at how natural he looked in the role. You're good at this, she said softly, entering the room. Gabriel looked up with a smile that transformed his entire face. They're excellent listeners. Very attentive audience. Much better than your board of directors, I'm sure. Infinitely better. They don't interrupt or ask for revised profit projections. Isabella laughed despite herself. This playful side of Gabriel was new, or perhaps it was simply a part of him she'd never been allowed to see before. The nurses want to give you a break for a few hours, Isabella said. Why don't you go handle some business calls? I can stay with them. Gabriel shook his head. The business can wait. I'm exactly where I want to be. The simple declaration sent warmth flooding through Isabella's chest. Gabriel, you can't put your entire empire on hold indefinitely. Watch me. His gray eyes held hers with familiar intensity, but there was something different now, a peace she'd never seen before. I've spent 15 years building that empire, Isabella. For what? To prove something to myself? To fill the emptiness where a family should have been? None of it matters if I'm not here for the moments that count. Isabella settled onto the floor beside him, close enough to smell his cologne, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. You really have changed. Have I? Gabriel's voice dropped to the intimate register that had always made her pulse race. Or have I finally become the man I was always meant to be? Before she could answer, Grace began to fuss, her little face scrunching with displeasure. Isabella reached for her, but Gabriel was already there, scooping up his daughter with practiced ease. What's wrong, princess? Hungry? Tired? Bored with Daddy's story choices? Watching Gabriel comfort Grace with such natural tenderness broke something open in Isabella's chest. This was the father she dreamed of for their children, patient, devoted, present, not the controlling man she'd feared he would become. She likes it when you hum, Isabella said softly. That little melody you used to hum while you worked. Gabriel glanced at her in surprise. You remember that? I remember everything about you. The admission slipped out before Isabella could stop it. The good and the bad. The way you hummed when you were concentrating. The way you made coffee exactly the way I liked it without being asked. The way you listened to my dreams like they were the most important things in the world. Gabriel began humming the half-remembered melody, and Grace settled immediately against his chest. I remember everything about you too. The way you bite your lip when you're thinking. How you arrange flowers with the same precision you use for architectural drawings. The little sigh you make when you're falling asleep. The air between them grew charged with memory and possibility. Isabella found herself studying Gabriel's profile as he comforted their daughter, the strong line of his jaw, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the gentle curve of his mouth as he hummed. Isabella. Her name on his lips was a caress. Yes. I need to tell you something. Gabriel's voice was carefully controlled, but she heard the undercurrent of vulnerability. About why I was so controlling during our marriage. About why I couldn't let you have space to breathe. Isabella waited, sensing the importance of whatever he was about to reveal. My mother left when I was 7, Gabriel began, his voice soft so as not to disturb Grace. No warning, no explanation. One day she was there, and the next she was gone. My father found a note saying she couldn't handle being a mother anymore. Gabriel, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I never told you because I was ashamed. Ashamed that my own mother couldn't love me enough to stay. Ashamed that I wasn't enough to make her want to fight for our family. Isabella's heart broke for the 7-year-old boy who had been abandoned by the person who should have loved him unconditionally. When I met you, when I fell in love with you, that old terror came roaring back. The fear that if I wasn't perfect, if I didn't control every variable, you'd leave too. So I tried to make it impossible for you to go. I tried to make myself so essential to your life that you couldn't imagine existing without me. But all you did was make me feel trapped. I know that now. Gabriel's arms tightened protectively around Grace. Therapy helped me understand that my attempts to prevent abandonment were actually causing it. That love requires trust, and trust requires the freedom to choose. Isabella felt tears prick her eyes. If you told me this during our marriage, would it have changed anything? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. Isabella reached out to touch his free hand. I would have understood why you needed so much reassurance. I could have given you that without sacrificing my independence. Gabriel's fingers intertwined with hers. I've spent 3 years learning to be worthy of a second chance, Isabella. Not trying to win you back through manipulation or control, but becoming the man you deserved the first time. And what if I'd never come back? What if you'd done all that work for nothing? Gabriel's smile was soft and self-deprecating. Then I'd have become a better man for the next woman who was brave enough to love me. But I never stopped hoping that someday, somehow, you'd give me another chance to love you the right way. The raw honesty in his voice took Isabella's breath away. This vulnerability, this willingness to expose his deepest fears and failures, was something the old Gabriel would never have shown her. What does loving me the right way look like? She asked quietly. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. It looks like supporting your dreams instead of controlling them. It looks like trusting you to make your own choices, even when those choices scare me. It looks like being your partner instead of your keeper. He shifted Grace to one arm so he could face Isabella fully. It looks like asking instead of demanding, like requesting instead of requiring, like loving you enough to let you go if that's what makes you happy. And if what makes me happy is staying. Gabriel's gray eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her pulse race. Then I'll spend the rest of my life proving that your happiness is more important to me than my own. The promise hung between them, weighted with possibility and hope. Isabella felt herself wavering on the edge of a decision that could change everything. Gabriel, I know you need time, he said quickly. I know I have to earn your trust again. I'm not asking for promises or declarations. I'm just asking for a chance to show you who I've become. Before Isabella could respond, Emma began crying from her bouncy seat, demanding attention with typical Sterling determination. The moment broke as both parents rushed to comfort their daughter, but the conversation lingered in the air between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. That evening, after the babies were settled for the night under the watchful eyes of their private nurses, Isabella found herself standing on the terrace where Gabriel had first proposed to her 4 years ago. The Hudson Valley spread out below in moonlit splendor, and the night air carried the scent of late summer flowers. Beautiful night. Isabella turned to find Gabriel approaching with 2 glasses of wine. He'd changed from his daytime clothes into dark slacks and a white shirt open at the throat, looking relaxed in a way she'd rarely seen during their marriage. Thank you, she said, accepting the wine. It was her favorite vintage, naturally. Gabriel had always been attentive to such details. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the lights of distant towns twinkle like fallen stars. Isabella found herself hyper-aware of Gabriel's presence beside her, the warmth of his body, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way he held himself with that characteristic confidence that had first attracted her years ago. "Do you remember our first night here?" Gabriel asked softly. "When you brought me to see the estate for the first time. I was so overwhelmed by all of this." Isabella gestured to the mansion behind them, the manicured grounds, the obvious wealth on display. "You said it was too much, that you didn't belong in a place like this. And you said I belonged wherever you were." Isabella's smile was tinged with sadness. "I wanted to believe that was true. It was true. It is true." Gabriel set down his wine glass and turned to face her fully. "But I understand now that belonging somewhere doesn't mean being trapped there. It means choosing to be there freely, every day." Isabella studied his face in the moonlight, searching for any sign of the controlling man she'd fled from 3 years ago. Instead, she saw only sincerity and a vulnerability that took her breath away. "The old you would have locked me in a tower to keep me here," she said lightly, testing. Gabriel's laugh was rueful. "The old me probably would have built you a tower and convinced myself it was for your own protection. The new me understands that you'll only stay if you want to be here." "And what if I don't want to stay?" The question was cruel, perhaps, but Isabella needed to see how Gabriel would react to the possibility of losing her again. Would his carefully constructed growth crumble under pressure? Gabriel's face went very still, but when he spoke, his voice remained steady. "Then I'll help you find a place where you and the girls will be safe and happy. I'll visit as often as you'll allow, and I'll love you from whatever distance you need me to maintain." The answer was so unexpected, so contrary to everything the old Gabriel would have said, that Isabella felt tears prick her eyes. "You'd really let me go? Again, if that's what you needed to be happy." Gabriel's smile was heartbreaking in its sincerity. "But I'm hoping you'll give me a chance to show you why you might want to stay." Before Isabella could ask what he meant, Gabriel stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face with devastating gentleness. "I want to court you, Isabella. Properly this time. I want to take you to dinner and bring you flowers and listen to your dreams without trying to control them. I want to earn your love instead of demanding it." "Gabriel, I know you feel it too," he continued, his voice dropping to that intimate register that had always undone her. "This pull between us, it never went away, did it? Even when you hated me, even when you were running from me, you felt it." Isabella couldn't deny the truth of his words. Standing this close to him, feeling the warmth of his hands on her face, breathing in his familiar scent, she was acutely aware of the desire that had always simmered between them. "Feeling it and acting on it are two different things," she whispered. "I'm not asking you to act on anything tonight." Gabriel's thumbs traced her cheekbones with maddening gentleness. "I'm asking you to let me show you how much I've changed. Let me prove that I can love you without caging you. And if you revert to your old ways, if the control and jealousy come back, then you walk away, and I don't try to stop you." Gabriel's gray eyes held hers with unwavering intensity. "But Isabella, I'm not the same man who let you go 3 years ago. I'm not the man who was so afraid of losing you that he drove you away. I've learned to trust and love instead of fear." Isabella felt herself wavering on the edge of a precipice. Everything rational told her to be cautious, to protect herself from being hurt again. But her heart, her treacherous heart, was already falling. "One chance," she heard herself saying. "You get one chance to prove you've changed. But Gabriel, if you try to control me, if you make me feel trapped again, I will leave and I will take the girls with me." Gabriel's smile was blinding in its joy. "One chance is all I need." Before she could second-guess herself, before rational thought could intervene, Isabella rose on her tiptoes and kissed him. It was meant to be a gentle kiss, a tentative exploration of possibility. Instead, it ignited like wildfire. Gabriel's response was immediate and devastating. His arms came around her, pulling her against his hard body as he deepened the kiss with desperate hunger. 3 years of separation, of longing, of careful restraint poured out in that single point of contact. Isabella kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his shirt as she pressed closer to his heat. She had forgotten how perfectly they fit together, how his larger frame made her feel delicate and cherished. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Gabriel rested his forehead against hers, his gray eyes dark with desire. Isabella. I know. She could feel the evidence of his arousal against her hip, could see the barely leashed hunger in his expression. I know what you want. What we both want. But not tonight. Isabella stepped back, putting space between them before her resolve could crumble completely. If we're going to do this, if we're going to try again, we do it right. Slowly, with trust instead of desperation. Gabriel nodded, though she could see the effort it cost him to maintain control. You're right. We have time. All the time in the world. Do we? Isabella couldn't quite keep the uncertainty from her voice. What happens when the girls are fully recovered? When there's no medical reason for me to stay here? Gabriel's smile was soft and sure. Then you decide whether you want to stay for other reasons. Whether what we're building together is worth fighting for. As Isabella made her way to her suite that night, she found herself hoping that it would be. 6 months later. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Isabella's art studio, illuminating the drafting table where her latest architectural drawings were spread. The space Gabriel had created for her was perfect. North-facing windows for optimal light, state-of-the-art equipment, and enough room for both detailed technical work and creative exploration. Isabella was sketching preliminary designs for a new community center when she heard familiar sounds from the baby monitor, Emma's delighted giggling and Grace's more reserved coos. Through the monitor, she could hear Gabriel's voice, deep and warm as he played with their daughters. And this little piggy went to market, and this little piggy stayed home. More giggles from Emma, who had always been the more outgoing of the twins. At 9 months old, both girls were thriving, their breathing problems completely resolved and their development right on track. Isabella set down her pencil and made her way to the nursery, where she found Gabriel on the floor, surrounded by toys. Emma was sitting up independently now, clapping her hands as her father made silly faces. Grace, more cautious by nature, watched from her bouncy seat with serious gray eyes that missed nothing. Good morning, my darlings, Isabella said, entering the room. Both babies turned toward her voice, Emma's face lighting up with a smile that could melt hearts. Mama, Emma babbled, reaching chubby arms toward Isabella. It was one of her first clear words, and it never failed to make Isabella's heart soar. Someone's been practicing her vocabulary, Gabriel observed, rising gracefully from the floor. Even in casual clothes, jeans, and a simple white t-shirt, he remained devastatingly handsome. Dr. Peterson says they're both ahead of their developmental milestones, Isabella said, scooping up Emma for a cuddle. No lasting effects from their early medical issues. They're perfect. Gabriel's voice held a wonder that still surprised Isabella after all these months. Absolutely perfect. The past 6 months had been a revelation. True to his word, Gabriel had courted Isabella with patience and tenderness, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. He'd supported her return to architectural work, celebrated when she won a prestigious design competition, and encouraged her to reconnect with old friends and colleagues. Most importantly, he'd proven that his transformation was real. There had been moments when his old jealousies had surfaced, when Isabella worked late with a male colleague, when she mentioned having coffee with her ex-coworker Marcus. But instead of responding with control and demands, Gabriel had talked through his feelings openly and honestly. I trust you, he'd said after a particularly difficult conversation about Isabella's renewed friendship with Marcus. I may not always trust my own insecurities, but I trust you completely. And I trust what we're building together. That level of emotional maturity and self-awareness was something the old Gabriel never could have achieved. I have a surprise for you, Gabriel said now, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Oh, what kind of surprise? The kind that requires a babysitter and your most beautiful dress. Isabella raised an eyebrow. Gabriel Sterling, are you asking me on a date? I'm asking my wife on a date, he corrected, and Isabella's heart did a little flip at the casual way he'd claimed that title. They hadn't remarried. That conversation was still somewhere in their future, but the connection between them felt stronger than any legal document. Where are we going? Gabriel's smile was mysterious. That would ruin the surprise. But I will say this, it involves something you've wanted to do for a very long time. Isabella's mind raced through possibilities, but Gabriel had become expert at keeping his surprises truly surprising. What time? 7 o'clock. And Isabella? Gabriel stepped closer, his voice dropping to that intimate register that never failed to make her pulse race. Wear the blue dress. The one you wore to the Morrison Gala. Isabella felt heat rise in her cheeks. The blue dress was stunning. A flowing creation in midnight silk that Gabriel had bought for her shortly after her return to the estate. She'd worn it exactly once, to a charity event where Gabriel had barely been able to keep his hands off her. You have excellent taste in dresses, she said lightly. I have excellent taste in women, Gabriel replied, leaning down to kiss her softly. Specifically, one woman who continues to amaze me every single day. That evening, Isabella stood before her bedroom mirror, adjusting the flowing silk of the blue dress Gabriel had requested. The gown was even more beautiful than she remembered, cut to skim her curves while maintaining an air of elegant sophistication. The deep blue brought out the color of her eyes and complemented her skin tone perfectly. She'd taken extra care with her hair and makeup, styling her chestnut waves in loose curls and applying just enough cosmetics to enhance her natural features. The woman looking back at her from the mirror looked confident, radiant, happy, a far cry from the exhausted, desperate woman who had begged for her children's lives 6 months ago. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Come in. Gabriel entered, immaculate in a black tuxedo that emphasized his tall, lean frame. The sight of him took Isabella's breath away. He looked like he'd stepped off the cover of a magazine, all masculine elegance and dangerous charm. You look. Gabriel's voice trailed off as he took in her appearance. Stunning. Absolutely stunning. You clean up pretty well yourself. Isabella smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his lapel, using the excuse to touch him. Now are you going to tell me where we're going? Lincoln Center, Gabriel said, and Isabella's eyes widened. Specifically, the Metropolitan Opera House. They're performing La Boheme tonight. Isabella gasped. Gabriel, how did you? Those tickets have been sold out for months. I may have made a substantial donation to the opera company's endowment fund. Gabriel's smile was pleased with himself. I remembered you mentioning how much you wanted to see this particular production. It was such a Gabriel thing to do, using his wealth and influence not to control or manipulate, but to make her dreams come true. Isabella felt tears prick her eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gesture. You remembered a casual comment I made months ago? I remember everything you tell me, Isabella. Your dreams matter to me. The simple declaration hit her like a physical blow. This was what she'd always wanted from Gabriel, not grand gestures or expensive gifts, but the knowledge that he truly listened to her, that her happiness mattered to him more than his own agenda. Thank you, she whispered, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him softly. This means everything to me. Gabriel's arms came around her, holding her close without musing her carefully styled hair or makeup. You mean everything to me. They were interrupted by a discreet cough from the doorway. James stood there, dressed in his usual impeccable suit, holding car keys. The car is ready, Mr. Sterling, and the girls are settled with Maria for the evening. They've been fed, bathed, and should sleep through the night. Thank you, James. Gabriel offered Isabella his arm. Shall we? The drive into Manhattan was magical. Gabriel had arranged for his driver to take the scenic route along the Hudson River, giving them time to talk and watch the city lights reflect on the water. Isabella found herself relaxing completely for the first time in months, luxuriating in this feeling of being cherished and cared for. Penny for your thoughts, Gabriel said, noticing her contemplative mood. I was just thinking about how different this feels from our marriage before. You would have told me we were going to the opera, not surprised me with it. You would have chosen my dress instead of requesting one. Everything would have been perfectly planned and executed, but it wouldn't have felt like a gift. Gabriel nodded thoughtfully. Control versus care. I'm still learning the difference, but I think I'm getting better at it. You are. Isabella reached for his hand. Tonight feels like a gift. Like something you're giving me because you want to see me happy, not because you want to impress me or demonstrate your power. Your happiness is my power now, Gabriel said softly. The only power that matters. The Metropolitan Opera House was breathtaking, its grand architecture and glittering chandeliers creating an atmosphere of timeless elegance. Gabriel had somehow secured a private box with perfect views of both the stage and the rest of the opera house. This is incredible, Isabella breathed, taking in the opulent surroundings. Wait until you see the performance, Gabriel said, settling beside her as the lights dimmed. The opera was everything Isabella had hoped and more. The music soared through the magnificent space, the performances were transcendent, and the story of love and loss unfolded with heartbreaking beauty. Isabella found herself completely transported, caught up in the passion and tragedy playing out on stage. During intermission, as they sipped champagne in their private box, Gabriel watched Isabella's animated discussion of the performance with obvious delight. "You're glowing," he observed. "I don't think I've ever seen you this happy." "I feel happy," Isabella admitted. "Truly, deeply happy. For the first time in, God, maybe for the first time ever." Gabriel's expression grew serious. "Even during our marriage? You were never this happy?" Isabella considered the question carefully. "I was happy, but it was always tinged with anxiety. Always wondering when the next restriction would come, when you'd decide I was spending too much time on my work or my friends. I was happy, but I wasn't free. And now I feel both." Isabella met his gaze directly. "Happy and free. Loved and independent. It's an incredible feeling." Gabriel's smile was soft and grateful. "That's all I've ever wanted to give you. All I should have given you from the beginning." The second act was even more powerful than the first, building to a climax that left Isabella with tears streaming down her face. As the final notes died away and the audience erupted in applause, Gabriel gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. "Beautiful," he murmured, and she knew he wasn't talking about the opera. "Thank you," Isabella said as they made their way out of the opera house. "This was perfect. Absolutely perfect." "The night's not over yet," Gabriel said mysteriously. He guided her to a different car than the one that had brought them. This one smaller and more intimate. "Where are we going now?" "One more surprise." They drove through the quieter streets of the Upper East Side, eventually stopping in front of a building Isabella recognized, but hadn't seen in years. "This is your old apartment building," Gabriel confirmed. "The one you lived in when we first met." Isabella looked up at the modest brownstone, remembering the tiny studio apartment where she'd lived as a struggling young architect. "Why are we here?" Gabriel led her up the front steps to the building's entrance. "Because this is where our story really began. Not at the gala where we met, but here. The first time I came to pick you up for dinner, when you answered the door in paint-splattered jeans and apologized for the mess." Isabella remembered that night vividly. She'd been working on a freelance project, her tiny apartment covered in blueprints and architectural drawings. Gabriel had arrived in his expensive suit looking completely out of place in her bohemian chaos. "You said my apartment had character," Isabella recalled. "I said it had character, but what I was really thinking was that it had you. And that made it the most beautiful space I'd ever seen." Gabriel pulled out a set of keys, and Isabella stared at him in shock. "Gabriel, you didn't. I bought the building 6 months ago. Had your old apartment completely renovated. It's yours now, if you want it. A space that's entirely yours, where you can work or think or just be alone when you need to." Isabella felt her heart stop. "You bought me an apartment?" "I bought you freedom," Gabriel corrected gently. "A place where you can go whenever you feel trapped or overwhelmed. A reminder that you always have choices, that you're with me because you want to be, not because you have to be." The gesture was so thoughtful, so perfectly calibrated to address her deepest fears about being controlled, that Isabella felt tears spring to her eyes again. "Show me," she whispered. The apartment had been transformed from her memory of cramped chaos into a beautiful, light-filled space. The walls had been knocked out to create an open floor plan, with soaring ceilings and enormous windows overlooking a private garden. A state-of-the-art drafting station occupied one corner, while comfortable seating areas invited relaxation and contemplation. "It's beautiful," Isabella breathed. "But Gabriel, this is too much. I can't accept something like this." "You're not accepting a gift," Gabriel said firmly. "You're accepting a promise. A promise that I will never again try to cage you or control you. That you will always have somewhere to go if you need space. That your independence is as important to me as your presence." Isabella walked through the space, running her fingers over the custom-built tents, the carefully chosen furniture, the art supplies arranged with obvious care. Everything had been selected with her tastes and needs in mind, but more than that, everything had been chosen to give her power and autonomy. "There's one more thing," Gabriel said quietly. He led her to what had once been the bedroom area, now transformed into a sitting room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. On the central shelf, in a place of honor, sat a single framed photograph. Isabella moved closer and gasped. It was a picture from their wedding day, but not one of the formal portraits they'd posed for. This was a candid shot, taken during the reception, showing Isabella laughing at something Gabriel had whispered in her ear. Her face was radiant with joy, and Gabriel was looking at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. "Where did you get this?" James took it. He said it was his favorite picture from the entire day because it showed how we really felt about each other underneath all the formality and expectations. Isabella studied the photograph, remembering that moment. Gabriel had been telling her about a silly mistake the wedding planner had made, something completely insignificant that had struck them both as hilarious. It was one of the few moments that day when they'd felt like themselves instead of performers in an elaborate production. "We were happy then," she said softly. "We were, and we can be again." Gabriel moved to stand behind her, his reflection joining hers in the glass covering the photograph. But differently this time. Better this time. Isabella leaned back against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "Gabriel, yes, take me home. To the estate." Isabella turned in his arms, looking up into his gray eyes with an expression that made his breath catch. "Take me home to our bed. Make love to me like you mean it. Like we're really starting over." Gabriel's arms tightened around her. "Isabella, are you sure? We don't have to rush anything. We have all the time in the world." "I'm sure." Isabella rose on her tiptoes, pressing her lips to his ear. "I love you, Gabriel Sterling. The man you were, the man you've become, the man you're still becoming. I want to be your wife again. In every sense of the word." Gabriel's control finally snapped. He kissed her with all the pent-up longing of 6 months of careful restraint, 6 months of proving himself worthy of her trust. Isabella melted against him, her body recognizing its perfect match, its home. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Are you going to marry me again?" Gabriel asked, his voice rough with desire and emotion. "Yes," Isabella whispered. "But first, you're going to take me home and remind me why I fell in love with you in the first place." Gabriel's smile was blazing with joy and desire. "With pleasure, Mrs. Sterling. With absolute pleasure." 1 year later, the second wedding was nothing like the first. Instead of the grand ballroom at the plaza, Isabella and Gabriel exchanged vows in the garden of the Sterling estate, surrounded by close family and friends. Instead of a designer gown that cost more than most people's cars, Isabella wore a simple but elegant dress in cream silk that moved like liquid when she walked. Emma and Grace, now walking toddlers with opinions about everything, served as flower girls with varying degrees of success. Emma took her job seriously, carefully dropping rose petals along the aisle. Grace, more interested in the butterflies dancing among the flowers, wandered off course and had to be gently guided back by her Uncle James. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but his words were interrupted by Emma's delighted squeal as she spotted her parents at the altar. "Mama, Dada," she called out, breaking free from her grandmother's gentle hold and toddling toward the altar with determination. The entire gathering burst into laughter as Gabriel scooped up his daughter, settling her comfortably in his arms for the ceremony. "I think she wants to make sure we're really doing this," Gabriel said to Isabella, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Smart girl," Isabella replied, reaching out to stroke Emma's soft curls. "She wants to witness her parents promising to love each other forever." "Forever," Gabriel repeated, his voice soft but carrying clearly in the garden air. "That's exactly what I'm promising." The ceremony continued with Emma providing occasional commentary and Grace joining them halfway through when she decided she wanted to be part of the action too. It was chaotic and imperfect and absolutely perfect. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife once again, Gabriel's kiss was tender and full of promise. In the background, their daughters clapped with delight, and their friends and family cheered their approval. "Ladies and gentlemen," the minister announced with a broad smile, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Gabriel Sterling and their beautiful daughters Emma and Grace." As they walked back down the aisle together, Isabella felt a completeness she'd never known before. This wasn't the fairy tale wedding of her youth, full of illusions and impossible expectations. This was real love, tested by fire and proven strong enough to survive anything. No regrets? Gabriel asked as they posed for photos in the garden. Only one, Isabella replied, adjusting his tie with wily affection. Gabriel's expression grew concerned. What? I regret that it took us so long to get here. That we had to go through so much pain to learn how to love each other properly. Gabriel's smile was soft and understanding. Maybe we needed that journey. Maybe we weren't ready for this kind of love when we were younger. Isabella considered that, watching Emma and Grace play among the rose bushes while the photographer captured their joy. Maybe you're right. Maybe everything happened exactly as it was supposed to. Even the twins getting sick. Even you having to beg me for help. Isabella's expression grew serious. Especially that. Because it forced us both to face who we really were and who we wanted to become. It stripped away all our pretenses and showed us what really mattered. And what really matters. Isabella gestured to their daughters, to their friends and families celebrating around them, to the home they'd built together on a foundation of hard-won trust and understanding. This, all of this, love that's chosen freely every day, family that's built on honesty instead of control, a future that we're creating together, as equals, as partners. Gabriel pulled her close, mindful of her silk dress and the photographer's camera. I love you, Isabella Sterling. Thank you for giving me the chance to become the man you deserved. I love you too, Gabriel. Thank you for becoming him. As the sun set over the Hudson Valley, casting golden light over the celebration, Isabella reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the desperate phone call in a hospital corridor to this moment of perfect happiness, they had traveled a long and difficult road. But some roads, Isabella thought as she watched Gabriel spin Emma in circles while Grace clapped with delight, are worth every step when they lead you home. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button for more incredible love stories. Share this with someone who believes in the power of forgiveness, and let me know in the comments. Do you believe Gabriel truly changed, or would you have walked away? I'll be reading every single comment. Sometimes we must lose everything to find what truly matters. Sometimes love requires the courage to start over, to trust again, to believe that people can change and grow and become better versions of themselves. Gabriel and Isabella Sterling learned that love isn't about possession or control, it's about choice. Every day, they choose each other. Every day, they choose to build something beautiful together. And every day, their love grows stronger because it's founded on freedom instead of fear. That's the kind of love worth fighting for. That's the kind of love that can survive anything. That's the kind of love that changes everything.